I am David Reid, candidate for Circuit Court Judge in the 7th Judicial Circuit, which includes the 6 counties of Macoupin, Sangamon, Morgan, Scott, Jersey, and Greene. This is my first try at elective office. It was daunting to decide to run, but it's been rewarding. By way of personal background, I'm from Springfield, born and raised here. Went to St. Joe's Grade School, Griffin High School. Father, Dave Reid, was a mine worker and then worked for Kraft Foods. Mother, Marge Reid, had a daycare center for a period and then worked for Doctors Park, was a receptionist at Doctors Park. I have a brother, Jack Reid, a brother, Jim Reid, sister, Connie Reid. I'm the oldest of the group. I have 3 children. David, from a prior marriage, who works on the Cardinals ground crew and is also a teacher. Beth and I have 2 children, Sarah, who's doing her MBA at Georgetown, and Catherine, who's a journalist in television journalist in Huntsville, Alabama. And she went to one of the best schools for journalism. I don't know if it was Missouri or Northwestern. But my family was working class growing up. I'm the first one in my family to go to college and graduate from college. I played sports in high school and was fortunate to receive a scholarship to SIU Carbondale. Played down there for 4 years. Was a wide receiver. Was elected to the Springfield Sports Hall of Fame. So that's a feather in my cap. And I'll tell you, as you get older, your chances improve because more and more people forget how good you were. But I'm proud of that fact. Beth and I have been married for 28 years, and she's a dermatologist here in Springfield, and I've been a practicing attorney. After college, I went to law school at the University of Miami in Coral Gables. While there, I also worked for Miami-Dade County, which includes Miami and Coral Gables and all those cities, Hialeah, in southeast Florida. I received that job as a result of finishing a Master's in Public Administration here at Sangamon State University, now UIS Springfield. And I gained that degree at night while working at Horace Mann Insurance Company. In Miami, I was in a internship program where you worked 3 months in 4 different departments. So I worked with the Miami-Dade Police, I worked with the Budget Office, Human Resources Department, and Public Works. So that gave me a good overview of county government and how it works. During my stay with the Office of Management and Budget, I also received an MBA program. And then when I graduated, I moved back to Springfield and met my present wife, Beth. And then we moved to Atlanta, where she did a dermatology residency, and we were down there for 3 years. And upon completion of her program, we moved back to Springfield. I've been in private practice since 1992. I worked for a couple years with Brown, Hay, and Stevens, which is a big law firm, well-respected law firm here in Springfield, and then started my own practice in 1995, and I've been in private practice ever since. I've done a lot of work in the community. I've been president of the Springfield Art Association. I've worked with the Sacred Heart Griffin Board of Directors. I've been president of the Center for Assisting Parochial Education, which is a not-for-profit corporation I started to try to help the parochial teachers receive more money for teaching. teacher salaries have been low, and we started a group that tried to show or educate the public that the salaries were so low, and as a result, we made some improvements in the salaries for teachers at Catholic schools. Since then, my private practice, I've been primarily estate planning, tax, probate, litigation. While in Atlanta, I went to Emory and received a master's in tax law from Emory. So again, I do a lot of tax work. The need for tax attorneys in Springfield is not as great as a larger city because most of the larger firms and companies that need tax assistance are in larger cities. So as a result, I've expanded to do other work to keep the practice vibrant. I've also been a judge with the Court of Claims and a commissioner for the Court of Claims for approximately 10 years. The Court of Claims hears all cases where the state of Illinois is sued. So it would be contract cases, tort or personal injury cases, prisoner cases. And I was a judge for 3 years and then have been a commissioner for about 7 years. As a commissioner, I'm a hearing officer and develop the record of the case to present it to the judges for a decision. That experience has been very helpful because I've had thousands of cases, and I work to move those cases through the system as quickly as possible. I think that would be appropriate in my role as a circuit court judge to try to do the same. That is essentially my personal background. Are there any other questions or things you'd like me to cover at this point?
Sure. So you mentioned this is your first foray
Correct.
into running for elected office. Is electing judges the right way to get judges?
I had that same question. I know some states, I'm admitted to practice in Florida and Georgia also, and I know Florida appoints, and I think there's good and bad in both systems. But all in all, I believe the appointment process is probably better because it's less partisan politics than the appointment process. Now, there are exceptions to that, but I think the partisan politics, I think the judicial or the judges shouldn't be elected. I think there should be another process for that.
What do you think some of the top, 3 to 5 characteristics that make a good judge?
Well, I'm going to go to my bar poll results, and for these elections, the Illinois State Bar Association does a bar poll where they ask the attorneys to vote on who would be the best candidate. And there are, let me find that, there are 7 areas where they look at the candidates and make a decision on. One of them is legal ability, one of them is sensitivity and diversity. Another one would be health, court management. But of those, I think the most important is legal ability and experience, as rated by my peers who vote in a confidential. It's an election, just like a presidential election. I've received high scores, higher than my opponent, in all of these legal categories. And especially, I would highlight legal ability and legal experience. My opponent has had 4 bar poll results since 2007, where she's tried to gain a judicial position, and of those, she failed 3 of them and just recently received a passing score in this the February bar poll. But her legal score was only 68%, where I was at 80%. So again, I think that shows that the attorneys who know me and have practiced before against me have given me high scores. Again, it's pretty simplistic, but if you want to hire a plumber, you typically would talk to other plumbers that are qualified, and I think that same rationale applies in this case. I've also received the highest scores in integrity. So I think I've done very well, and those are my peers that voted on both candidates. In addition, I'll say that in private practice, Martindale-Hubbell is a group that does reviews and gives grades to attorneys, and I've received an AV, which is the highest classification for legal ability and ethics. And that is a hard distinction to receive because it's very competitive, and the attorneys and judges vote on whether you're admitted or not. And unlike a lot of these top 100 attorneys and that, some of those you have to pay in amounts of pay to play. But this is that Martindale-Hubbell is well respected and very independent, and I'm proud of that. I'm also in leading lawyers, and I've been in that for about 10 years. And I think I have a good reputation.
I know one of them because I've got the list right here of what they use, the 8 professional categories that they use. One of them is temperament. How important do you think temperament is to?
Very much so. And I would say that that I have I'm kind of a low-key person. My temperament score has been very high, and if I don't have that, but I think I'm in the 90%, voted 90% in temperament. Again, I'm low-key. I don't get excited or angry, and I think temperament's very important. I know just from my experiences in the courtroom that a lot of the clients, a lot of the individuals in court are, afraid to go in and scared, and some of the judges are not as polite as they should be. And I think I have a good reputation. Again, my scores for temperament were higher than my opponent, and I think I've shown that I do well in that category. The other thing I'll say is with my working class background, I feel like I'm a regular guy, and I can talk and relate to people well. And I've been very good with working with people and working with clients, and my practice has been good. So I'm very comfortable with my temperament.
Have you done any criminal work? And if you don't have criminal experience, how much of a factor would that be, given that this court handles that?
Yes, I think it's important. I have done criminal work, but not as much as civil work. And so I've represented criminal defendants in state court, but mostly federal court, like drug offenses, and had trials and have done that work. I've done with my tax background and fraud cases. With the IRS, I worked on criminal cases that the IRS brought against individuals, and so I think I have that covered. I do. Being honest, I would have to refresh on some of the state criminal cases, and I intend to do that. And in fact, Tuesday of this week, I went to a seminar on orders of protection, domestic abuse, And I've also served as for the Sojourn Center. I've been a volunteer for the Sojourn Center for probably 20 years, where I would show up sign up and show up and represent clients that do not have an attorney. It's pro bono, but it's a good cause. And since I have 2 daughters, it's become more and more important to do that, and it's been a good experience. The other thing, too, I'll say about criminal cases, I think criminal cases are somewhat easier than civil cases because the state's attorney is there representing the state or police, and there would be a public defender for the criminal. So I think sometimes those rules are set forth clearer, and they're not as complicated as some of the civil cases that involve, contract issues and things like that.
If you are elected, are there any changes or special projects that you think the court should look at?
Absolutely. I have a program, and I've made a list of things that I want to do. And the first thing I would do is I would use Court of Claims Rule 218 to set pretrial calendars, scheduling calendars for cases. And in a Rule 218 case, I would meet with the attorneys and set up some timetables when things would have to be done by. And I found that to be very effective in these Court of Claims cases as far as moving cases through the system. Occasionally I would grant continuances, but for the most part I try to hold the attorney's feet to the fire, because I found that the quicker you move cases through, there's less frustration for the attorneys and for the clients, and also it saves them time and money. I think a lot of times when cases are continued, then people forget, aspects of it, and it goes in a file, and you don't get back to it, and the delay is not good for justice in my view. So I use those, and I would also use court management conferences to keep things on track. And I've used that a lot with my Court of Claims cases. And I'll also I don't talk to either side without the other one being present, but I'll schedule conference calls to move things up. I'll use email to move things quicker, and just try to take an approach to do that. The other thing that I would do is, where possible, I would rule on matters within 30 days of when they come to me for a decision. Now that may not be possible in every situation, but I would that would be my internal clock or deadline, if you will, to rule on cases so people aren't waiting. Again, the waiting just increases expenses and emotional turmoil for the individuals, and so I would try to do that where at all possible. And some of these ideas would be subject, as a circuit court judge, I would be subject to the chief judge for that circuit as to what I would do, but I think that Ken Deal is the chief judge now. I think he would agree with that concept. Another thing I would do is stress the voters in Illinois know very little about the judicial candidates. And so again, I commend you as journalists for doing this and having these interviews. I would, if elected, I would push the Illinois State Bar Association and the Illinois courts to do more on public education of the judicial candidates for purposes of educating the voters. And, Again, I'm admitted Florida, Georgia, and Illinois. And for example, Florida does a lot more. The Florida Bar Association, in conjunction with the League of Women Voters, they get together and put information together on the candidates, and they'll send out, they'll have a website, and they also mail out 150,000 brochures on the candidates and their background and that type of thing. And I think that Illinois and the court system needs to do a much better job of informing the public on the candidates. I think there needs to be more transparency in that process. Frankly, I think it almost seems that in Illinois, like the judges don't want that information out there. It's kind of it's hard to find. And I know the bar poll results were, there was an article by this paper in, I think it was February, just say that the total scores for each of the client who passed and didn't, but there was none of the detail as far as which candidate scored what in each category. And again, I think that's would be helpful to inform the public of that type of information. And the court system is growing. The court's administration office is growing, to be a large organization, and surely they have someone over there. They publish case results on their website, but half the population probably is not on a website. There's still the older voters that don't have access or don't want to have access to the internet. So I think that would be helpful. And between the Bar Association and the Illinois courts, I think that should be done.
So as you've practiced in different settings before different judges, have you seen traits or characteristics that you'd like to be sure to emulate, and some that you'd really like to never see in your courtroom?
Well, that's a good question. I'd like to go into a case when the case is assigned. I like to have received the file, read the case, know the facts, kind of spot the issue that I see coming about, and then meet with the attorneys and do some scheduling of discovery and that type of thing. I'm most distressed when I walk in a courtroom and the judge says, "What do we have today?" And that's prevalent more often than it should be, and the judge doesn't know the facts and isn't aware of the law, and it just kind of delays the process, because you have to reschedule or schedule things in the future, and it just delays the process. The thing I like, and I've been a recent trial in tax court. I've got a case pending in tax court now, $27 million. And I'll tell you, it keeps me awake at night thinking about that. But we have a judge, an excellent judge in that case, who is down to earth. And if there's objections, he'll talk through the objections and then make a ruling. And he's there to help the parties define the issue and present the issue to the court for adjudication. And I think that the helpful judge is more popular and a better judge than the judge that just says objection sustained and then let it go at that. I think it should be a process, and I would be, if elected, I would be a friendly judge and follow the procedures at the same time where possible, try to get the case presented for trial, because it's been my experience that there's a lot of attorneys that aren't familiar with certain aspects of the civil court rules, procedures, and you're helping that person's client if and you're not, I don't think, abusing any privileges, but if you can take steps to move the case forward, you're helping the person involved. I think that's important instead of being negative all the time about things. I'll tell you, I don't know if I told you why, I think you'd ask why I'm running for office, and I'd like to revisit that if I might, but again, I've had a very broad background, very broad education. I think I am an unusual candidate, frankly, for Central Illinois with my degrees and experiences. I have wanted to be a judge for some time, and my family, my family background was coal miners, and coal miners were Democrats back in those days. My family's been here for over 100 years, so I've just stayed a Democrat. But every district does this, and this here in Springfield, the 4th district, Justice Garman is a Republican. And the judges or justices in Chicago area or Democrats do the same thing. But it's been my experience that when there is an opening, there's a committee formed, and the committee will have, mostly I think Republicans, some Democrats, but I think that process is flawed because there's no one really vetting the applications that come in. And as a result, I think that the committee acts on information or submitted applications which may not have all the information required. And as an example, during this last process, my opponent, April Trumper, received the position, and frankly, I would have been shocked if she hadn't, because again, I think that it was a partisan choice, and again, I think the Democrats do that in Chicago. But the question I would have of the committee, and I don't know the answer to this, but the question I had with April's bar poll scores and some results of her cases where she's been reversed on, assuming that information was in the application, I don't know how the committee could have found her to be the highest qualified. Now, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm just saying that at some point I think it's a political process enters into that selection, and as a result, I didn't really have a reasonable expectation of getting the position, so I thought that I would just have to run for it, and so that's what I'm doing.
So you did not apply when?
No, I applied, and I went through it because I wanted to go through the process and make a good show and give it a shot, but realistically I didn't have any expectation to receive it because and I've done this before here, but the past several whenever the committees have had these meetings, it seems like it's always been a Republican. And again, to be fair, I think the Democrats do that in Chicago. But that's really what drove me to run for office. And I think that politics, and it's hard to avoid it, especially here in Illinois, but I don't think that politics should be part of that judicial process.